We heard earlier from Nico Jaspers that in the Democracy Perception Index, 48% of people saw big tech as a threat to democracy. I talked about that subject earlier with a couple of women who are deeply involved in it. I would like to welcome now the Vice President of the European Commission, Věra Jourová, also Vidya Gadi, Head of Legal Policy and Trust at Twitter. Thank you both for being here today. There may not be any more important topic for us to discuss here at this summit than the interplay between tech and social media and democracy. It is a very complex problem, including many questions. For instance, where do you draw the line between free speech and harmful speech? Who draws that line? And how do you ensure that the lines are actually respected in the end? Well, the Perception Index tells part of the story. 48% of those responding to the poll said that big tech is a threat to democracy in their country. And when it came to the question of whether tech should be regulated, 39% wanted more regulation to protect democracy, 17% said they wanted less, and also people who were worried about free speech did want less regulation. I have to start with the Facebook Oversight Board in its decision. It said that Facebook was correct in banning Donald Trump from Facebook, but they felt that it was inappropriate to have an indefinite suspension. And so they have given Facebook 6 months to make a final decision on what his status will be. Commissioner, I'd like to get your response to this first, since you had said to Politico a few months ago, the fact that big tech firms can silence a sitting U.S. president based on unclear criteria and without oversight can be dangerous to free speech. What do you think of what the Oversight Board did?
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you again for inviting me. Well, I always fear when I'm confronted with my own votes, whether I can be consistent. I can be on this one because what I said, I meant that, well, they probably didn't have much choice than to ban President Trump, yeah, because it was, according to many, the incitement to violence. And what I'm critical about is the ad hoc character of these decisions, unpredictability, managerial decisions on who to switch, who will be switched on and who will be switched off next time. And I think that this unpredictability, case-by-case decision-making, ad hoc solutions, this is something which we would not like to see in Europe. That's why, together with some understanding for the action of Facebook, I accompanied it with the conviction that in Europe, we want the law to define these rules so that the decisions of the managers, of the technological operators will be predictable, will be based on the law, will be also objects of more transparency. We need to know more what's happening on the platforms and in that decision making. So we are watching, in fact, what's happening in the US to take lessons from the EU, also for our regulatory plans.
Ms. Gotti, you were involved in the decision of Twitter to ban Trump permanently from the platform. What's your reaction to what you just heard from the commissioner, that this should all be set out in law?
Well, I do think that it's definitely a matter of collaboration, and the Vice President raises some really important points about transparency, consistency, and I think that this is really a place where we can collaborate effectively. Twitter has recently put out a public comment period on our world leaders policy, and we have asked for comments from civil society, government officials, academics, and we received over 49,000 or around 49,000 public comments on this policy. I think we all found ourselves in a very unprecedented situation that we needed to act in, and we tried to be as consistent and transparent about our decision making in that time frame. But we obviously, need to make sure that these policies are scalable and they meet the global needs of everyone, not just ours. And I would say one other thing. While I do believe companies have a really important role in terms of corporate governance and understanding their role and responsibility in society, I strongly believe that it is people and their citizens specifically who should hold governments accountable, not corporations.
Collaboration sounds great, but not every platform is willing to do that. In cases when they won't, is this a decision that should be made in the end by the platform, or should it be made by government?
Well, I think at the end of the day, there's two layers of governance here. There are always going to be platform policies that come into play that we need to enforce according to the purpose of our particular platform. In the case of Twitter, it's to serve the public conversation. And of course, we need to have platform governance mechanisms. But the government itself has a role to play, as they've shown. And hopefully what we can do is cooperate very closely with the government to make sure that we understand what their objectives are and that their solutions are actually scalable and not ones that are going to only entrench the largest players.
Commissioner, the EU is talking about regulating tech through the Digital Services Act and the European Democracy Action Plan. Can you lay out in general terms what these would do to protect democracy?
Yes, we decided to regulate, after all. First of all, I will start once again. We recognize all the positive things which the digital sphere is bringing to the society. At the same time, we decided to come with a regulation because we need to address in a targeted manner all the risks, and I could go through them. We all know what I speak about, that it is the dissemination of disinformation, which is not illegal, but it can be very harmful and dangerous content. We see it now in COVID. We see a lot of crime being distributed through the networks. Yeah, and here I would slightly not agree with what we heard from Vieira, that it should be the governments to order. It should be the law to order, because when we want the platforms to be free of crime, not to distribute child pornography, not to distribute hate speech, terrorism, we mainly say what is illegal offline must be also illegal online. And here the cooperation of the platforms is key to understand what's prohibited content by the law, what is prohibited content also in the case law of the constitutional courts in all the member states. So this is what we are looking at. We want the digital world, and not only the platforms which commit themselves through different codes, but all the platforms, all the business players. We want them to be more responsible, to be more transparent, to enable the oversight bodies to look into the algorithms, how they work. Because speaking about endangering democracy, we have to look at how algorithms work. And this is what I sometimes call the privatization of the public debate. Yeah, the people are discussing within the bubble, and then they are confronted with real life, where they hear different opinions. This is a big shock. And democracy, of course, it's a discussion, it's a dialogue, it's sometimes a big noise, especially now in a quickly changing world. And we simply see the deformation of the ability for this discussion by being trapped in those bubbles.
Ms. Gotti, how do you react to this proposal? Should this become law? What effect is it going to have on your business? And more specifically, are you willing to share your algorithms so other people can see what you're doing?
Thank you. I think these raise really important points. I would say that Digital Services Act and the Democracy Action Plan are taking a much more progressive approach to addressing some of the online challenges. So I am confident we're moving in the right direction. And there's always an opportunity for industry and companies like Twitter to collaborate even further with the Commission to make sure that these solutions actually make sense. I think that this is exactly right on algorithms. We do need to focus on this. I come at it from a slightly different perspective, which is really about offering consumers choice around how the content they see is surfaced to them and how it's discovered, because algorithms themselves are very, very complicated, of course, and just providing insight into them isn't going to be enough. And the technological place that we're in today, I don't think enables that to be a very meaningful thing for most consumers. However, giving consumers the opportunity to turn off those algorithms so that they're not influencing what they see, or even further, which is where Twitter hopes to go, is giving them choice over which algorithms they use and who creates those algorithms, is really, I think, a very, very interesting future state for us.
So let me follow up on that, if I might. If you agree that this is an important tool, why hasn't it happened already?
Well, I think it has happened, actually. If you look at Twitter as an example, we do offer the capability to disable the ranking algorithm on your home timeline. So you can have a reverse chronological feed, and we don't hide that in the settings. It's right on your timeline. So if you don't want Twitter to rank your content and you only want to see the content from the people that you follow in a reverse chronological timeline, that is very easy. It is one click.
Commissioner, foreign election interference is a huge issue. Going back to the Democracy Perception Index and its findings one more time, it tells us that fear about foreign election interference has grown from 55% to 60%. How do you deal with that?
Yes, these are just telling figures that we have to deal with that, because we have so many examples now how the public space was affected by foreign interference, by the well-targeted disinformation campaigns, by abusing the access to private data. The Cambridge Analytica case is still living with us as a stark reminder that we should do something more to protect the elections as the competition of visions of real people, and not the competition of dirty methods and manipulative techniques. So to protect elections against foreign manipulation, but also against the technologies which might end up in manipulation, we are planning to come with the regulation which is focusing purely on political advertising online. You cannot find it in the Digital Services Act, which is the general regulation, where there are the things which we spoke about, the increase of responsibility, increase of transparency, the oversight, and so on. I really wanted to have a special set of rules for political campaigning, because I do believe that the methods of marketing of products to be sold to consumers, it is a different story from selling politicians to citizens. And that here we have to be much more demanding on transparency, so that the people know that they read sponsored content. Also on transparency about financing of the sponsored content. We want to cover also the advertisers, and we want to look into how to make sure that the foreign interference will not influence the elections. So in the European Democracy Action Plan, we have an indication of what will be in this regulation, which we will adopt by the end of this year. A special attention we pay to the micro-targeting as the marketing method, because here I believe, again, we should be stricter than for the normal marketing of products to be sold to consumers.
Ms. Gotti, is that the right approach? Is it an effective approach? And let me ask you also about the foreign trolls and bots and what Twitter can do to help keep them from overtaking the dialogue on your platform.
Yes, we actually do think that a lot of this is the right approach. In fact, Twitter was one of the first and largest social media platforms to ban political advertising, because we saw the challenges associated with micro-targeting and what it could enable. and that the stakes were very high, given.
Excuse me for interrupting, but do you ban those ads entirely, or is it just during elections, close to elections?
No, they are banned in their entirety. We have some limited exception for cause-based advertising. This is around specific things like climate change and things that we want to allow people to discuss political issues. But when it comes to any mention of a candidate or anything related to an election, those ads are banned holistically across the platform, regardless of whether there's an election period at play. So we agree that this is a very dangerous world that we're in with respect to how these ads can influence the outcomes of elections. And we wanted to be very proactive here. And this is something that we did long before the last US election. On the other issue that you mentioned, which is foreign interference, I would say that this is a very troubling trend that we're seeing, state actors using their very significant power to manipulate online discourse. It's very troubling. It is something that is going to be very detrimental to our customer use case. Customers don't want to use a platform where they don't know who they're engaging with or where their information is coming from. So we're doing a couple of things here, which I would love to see across the industry. One, we are disclosing all of the state-backed information operations that we discover into a database so that researchers can have access to that information, identify what's being targeted, and potentially combat those narratives or understand the methods that are being used and prevent those from continuing to be used across platforms. So I think that's really critical, that transparency layer of what governments are actually doing. And I'm happy to give some details, but we're talking about, over 20 countries who've engaged in this type of behavior on Twitter alone.
In addition to making that available to researchers, are you sharing it with other platforms?
Well, we are sharing the results of that. I would be happy to share it with other platforms if they would agree to the terms of use, but it's very critical. Obviously, a lot of sensitive information in these databases, so we want to make sure that they're used appropriately. But the learnings from those information operations are shared very, very broadly across platforms, and there is significant collaboration that we engage in.
Commissioner, did you want to respond to that? Do those sound like appropriate steps?
We want to know more what's happening. So that's why we are glad that the platforms are willing to share the data with us and also with the researchers. What we don't know much about is the impact on what the platforms are doing, because we understand the results, how many bots and fake accounts have been cancelled, but the impact has not been measured properly. We are now upgrading the code of practice against disinformation, and there we will probably increase the requirements for getting more data. But on this foreign influence, this is very tightly connected with the field of security. And here we are partly in the world of defense even. And I'm in a very intense cooperation with the NATO, because we take it very seriously, because, for instance, from Russia, the disinformation is used as a weapon. It is part of the military doctrine that they will use this weapon against united Europe. And here the cooperation will be and is key. We are working now on a set of sanctions with Joseph Borrell against the foreign purveyors of the organized disinformation campaigns. And what I speak here about, it's not a fight against some rumors or misinformation and fake news and sometimes even funny or innocent conspiracy theories. No, we have to increase our defense against coordinated attacks produced on purpose to do harm, to endanger security in Europe, to endanger the elections, the integrity of the society. We speak here about very serious potential risks and threats, where we really need the cooperation with the platforms, and so we will definitely do more against these attacks in the future.
Certainly, there's disinformation that is domestic as well, that is also harmful to society and potential to politics. Commissioner, is that tougher to get a handle on?
What is tougher? Definitely it is. I am not accusing only the foreign actors for spreading disinformation in the EU. Yeah, our own production, it's a headache because we see that it exists, it gains more and more power, and it correlates also with the willingness to accept lying as the normal instrument or tool for political fight. Yeah, in the past, I think that we were more careful about this, that the politicians who were caught lying in normal time, but especially before elections, they were normally disqualified. Yeah, it was a big thing. Somebody caught lying, he was dead for the political career. And now we are more and more accepting those alternative truths, which we had also in the United States. This is the US invention, this alternative truth term. So I think that we should do much more also to increase the hunger for the truth and recognition of the truth as the value. And this is about maybe a permanent effort to convince our society that truth really matters. And I know that I am now on a thin ice, because when the politicians speak about the truth, we can always be criticized that we speak about our own truth. Yeah. So I will not continue in that dangerous path now.
Ms. Gotti, let me follow up on that with you. I mean, how does a platform draw the lines? How do you figure out where the line is between a truth and lie? Sometimes it can be kind of fuzzy. And how do you make these determinations without trampling on free speech? It's got to be a very complicated proposition.
It is incredibly difficult. And I would say that we're all in this journey of learning what's most effective. Twitter has approached this by focusing on some very critical areas of misinformation, whether that's related to elections or COVID-19 and vaccines, because the harms that come from this type of misinformation are so dramatic. But what I will say here is that this is a whole of system approach. This is not just about social media, because you can address these issues on one platform, but if they are also in the press, like there's not much we can do unless we're addressing this across the board. And the other thing I'll say here, and I hope you all will take away from this talk that there are a lot more solutions to dealing with this than just removing content. Because when you remove content, you're removing the evidence, you're making people distrust you more. You're not relying on their own capability to like really understand what's going on. But there are other options here. We've been experimenting with labeling, which we think has some promising effects of providing context to people without just removing the content and saying like, look, here's some other information you should consider, and really giving the option of looking at that other information, I think builds more trust, which is really, really critical to addressing some of these issues that we're seeing in society.
We're close to being out of time, and I want to wrap up by asking you this. This is an urgent threat. Can the platforms and can the EU and governments act quickly enough? Can you find solutions fast enough to deal with this?
Yes and no. We have now the legislation out, and we need to see fast adoption by all legislators in the EU. And I think that we came with something which is proportionate, for instance, which is not going to push the platforms and other actors to remove someone's opinions. Yeah, because the facts belong to all of us and the opinions belong to ourselves. I would be the last one who would like to introduce some kind of censorship. Yeah, this is what I wanted to say. So fast adoption of the legislation, because I believe we did it right. And which will be slower but necessary is this change of the mindset which I would like to see more education, more resilience in the society, greater ability of recognizing which facts are easy to believe or not. Well, this will take longer time. This is urgent, but this is more about my understanding that it will take longer time than the adoption of the legislation.
Ms. Gotti, what do you think? Can we act fast enough to keep democracies safe?
Well, as the Vice President alluded, these are long-term issues. They've existed for a very long time in our societies, and they will continue to exist. What I can say is that we can act in very different ways to try different solutions, which is what we're doing right now. That's why these codes of conduct have been so valuable with the EU, because it allows us this opportunity to experiment, try different things, see if they work. If not, try something else. And that's where it's really important that legislation also gives some flexibility to try different things, because I don't think anyone has the answer today on what is it that's going to work the best. We all have to work together to figure out what are going to be the right long-term solutions. And in that process, we have to make sure, in my opinion, that we're not entrenching the largest players further, and that we're really considering that there may be a lot of innovative companies that are coming up that may have better solutions to this, and we don't want to force them out of the market before they can even start.
And we have to leave it there. Vieira Gotti of Twitter, thanks for joining us. Věra Jourová, Vice President of the European Commission, thank you also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day.